Chapter 731. Ethan had just fallen asleep when he heard the movement. He raised his head to see Olivia falling over and quickly wrapped his arms around her. "Are you okay, Liv?" Ethan's back was covered in a cold sweat despite already holding Olivia in his arms. Olivia's condition wasn't comparable to a regular person. Even a tiny fall could cause irreversible damage to her. Olivia's face was extremely pale. She had no energy to argue with Ethan. Even uttering a single word caused her major discomfort. It was like she was suffocating. "What's wrong? Are you thirsty or hungry? Let me know whatever you need." Olivia found it hard to speak up. Get me a female nurse." Ethan immediately understood and quickly brought her to the toilet. However, Olivia drove him out awkwardly, so he just waited by the door. He then gave Sharon a call to ask her to come over. Then, he proceeded to prepare breakfast for Olivia. Meanwhile, Olivia had exhausted all her strength after briefly washing up. Ethan helped her back onto the bed. "Liv, please don't throw a fit. The most important thing is to nurse your body back to health." Olivia looked at the seafood risotto. It would normally be appetizing for her, but she felt the urge to gag when she saw the food this time. She frowned and said, "I don't feel like eating." "Even so, you need to eat a little, please," Ethan coaxed her gently and patiently. He hadn't been sleeping well these past few days and had just pulled an all-nighter. The dark circles under his eyes were very obvious. There was also a hint of fatigue on his face. He slept on the small bed next to Olivia, and his expensive shirt was wrinkled from sleeping on it. But Ethan didn't care about himself, he only had Olivia in his eyes. Olivia found it strange. In the memories she had of Ethan, he had always acted coldly toward her. However, he had been nothing but loving toward her since she woke up. Olivia didn't understand why he would change so much. She didn't have anything that he could take anymore. As she was spacing out, Ethan fed her a spoonful of risotto. Olivia immediately gagged and spat it out after she swallowed. She spat it right on Ethan's chest. She felt a little awkward. "It's okay." Ethan took some tissues and cleaned it up. Then, he brought over a bowl of soup. "Since you can't take the risotto, try drinking some soup. It tastes fine. I've tried it beforehand. There are some chunks of fish in there. You should try to eat some to replenish protein." Olivia looked at Ethan in confusion. "What do you want from me, Ethan?" "Liv, you have to believe that I love you. Everything I do is in the hope that you can get better. Come, take a sip." Under his patient coaxing, Olivia drank a good amount of soup and forced herself to eat some of the fish while suppressing the nausea. She was basically like a disabled person. She couldn't do anything except lay in bed. She didn't even have the strength to turn over. For the entire day, Olivia drifted in and out of sleep. The discomfort she felt didn't subside either. Instead, it only got worse. Ethan felt devastated when he looked at Olivia unable to eat or sleep well. He wished he could suffer in her place. In her extreme pain, Olivia didn't even have the energy to stand up to Ethan. 3 days passed just like that. Ethan had stayed by Olivia the whole time and she finally started to regain some energy on the 4th day. But Ethan became more fatigued. He barely had time to sleep for the past few days and his eyes were bloodshot. The rainy weather passed too and Ethan noticed that Olivia was now in better spirits. He took a comb and went over. "Liv, the sun's out today. I'll bring you out for some sunlight." Olivia wasn't even in the mood to turn him down. After all, Ethan was a stubborn person. There was no Olivia sat quietly as Ethan gently combed her hair. But Ethan's smile froze after a stroke of the comb. He didn't use much force, but a huge clump of hair was stuck to the comb. Ethan then looked at the pillow. It was even more shocking. There were hundreds of strands of hair on the white pillow. Chapter 732. Noticing his sudden pause, Olivia asked casually, "What's wrong?" "It's nothing." Ethan's movement became even lighter. He didn't dare to use the slightest bit of force. Even so, her hair was still falling off. Ethan finally understood why Olivia chose to cut her hair short. He wasn't there with her in the past when she was at her most vulnerable. This time, he swore to be with her no matter what. He brushed his fingers gently through her hair and helped her into a jacket. Then, He carried her to a wheelchair and pushed her out of the room. He even asked someone to change the bedsheets before they left. It was in every woman's nature to want to be pretty. Ethan remembered that Olivia loved her long, glossy hair back when they were close. She would wear simple and elegant dresses and secure her hair with a hairpin. He remembered how smug she was when she told her she could pin her hair up with one hand. Olivia used to be talkative, but she barely ever spoke these days. She looked straight ahead, and no one could tell what she was thinking. Ethan pushed her into the shade of the trees. In front of them was a lawn where some patients and their family members were lazily basking in the sun. Birds were perched on the branches and chirping. The sky was blue, and the clouds were white. For a moment, the world seemed like a better place. Suddenly, a yellow ball rolled next to Olivia. The cartoon character on the ball had big, bright eyes and a smile on its face. "Mom," the tender voice of a child sounded. Olivia raised her head and saw a little boy running toward her. He was wearing a shirt, a tie, and suspenders. They briefly met once some days ago. The smile on his face looked brighter under the sun. "Is that Connor?" Olivia asked. "Yes. You came up with that name." Connor was already able to run freely by himself. He ran very quickly and soon approached Olivia. "Mom." He reached out and held Olivia's hand. His hand was small and soft, like cotton candy, like it would be broken with the slightest squeeze. As a mother, she couldn't resist it when he called her, Mom. Her heart immediately softened. It was her instinct. Even if she couldn't remember anything, intense feelings of affection blossomed in her heart when she saw Connor. But when she remembered what Daryl had said, the gentle expression on her face faded. She withdrew her hand and said coldly, "I'm not your mother." Connor didn't know why Olivia would suddenly give him the cold shoulder. He hadn't seen his mother in such a long time. Olivia had always been happy to hug him. Why did she suddenly change? She didn't even smile at him and was so mean to him. Tears welled up in Connor's eyes. He said, upset, "Mom. You're my mom." Olivia turned around to glare at Ethan. "You're sick. Not only did you round your whole family up to lie to me, you even got a child to do the same. He's still so young, yet you're teaching him to lie, abandon his actual mother, and come cozy up to me. I truly have seen everything now. You're mistaken, Liv. I'm not lying to you. He's actually your son." A girl's voice spoke weakly, "Daddy." Irina also showed up. She tugged at Ethan's sleeve and bit her lip in a pitiable expression. Marina was sitting in a wheelchair and looking at them from afar. Olivia looked at Irina's face and noticed she looked a lot like Marina. So, they were a pair of fraternal twins. The brother resembled the father, while the sister resembled the she forcibly propped herself up using the armrest and stood up, then slapped Ethan's face hard. "Scumbag, get out of here." Chapter 733. Sharon was standing a short distance away. She noticed the conflict and quickly came over to bring Olivia away. Before she left, she glared at Ethan disappointedly. She didn't understand why he would do something like that. The tension had barely eased a little, and he managed to make things uncomfortable so quickly. Brent approached Ethan and said, "Mr. Miller, you can't rush things. The more you rush, the more likely you'll get disappointing results." Ethan sighed. "I'm just afraid she doesn't have the will to live. I just want to give her a reason to live. I thought seeing Connor would trigger her maternal instinct, but things didn't go according to plan. Mr. Miller, you should stop trying. Mrs. Miller is already in a terrible state. You can't rile her up again. You should tell her about Master Connor next time. I guess that's my only option." Ethan crouched down and lifted Irina up. Although he hated Marina, Irina was the only baby Kurt left behind. Because of that, Ethan took good care of her. Marina slowly approached Ethan in her wheelchair. She said tentatively, "Ethan, I'm just here to visit Miss Fordham. I don't have any ulterior motives." "Daddy, Mommy misses you a lot," Irina said timidly. "Good girl." Ethan patted Irina on the head. For some reason, Olivia suddenly turned around. She saw Ethan carrying Irina in his arms like a loving father and smiling gently. The four of them looked like a close family when they stood together. The sight of that was quite jarring to Olivia. So, This was how Ethan wanted to show his love for her. It was laughable. Sharon quickly explained, "Mrs. Miller, don't misunderstand. Mr. Miller only has eyes for you. Please stop saying that, Sharon." Olivia felt disgusted by those words. Olivia was sent back to her room. Naturally, Ethan didn't allow Marina to visit her, but he was also shut out. Sharon stood at the door and said coldly, "It's Mrs. Miller's orders, sir. Please don't hold it against me." Liv misunderstood. "I want to explain to her." "Do you really think your explanations would work? In her eyes, you'd just be telling her more lies. I beg of you, stop doing things that would upset Mrs. Miller." Ethan was rendered speechless. He did a lot of things, and he did them in hopes of helping Olivia. In the end, everything he did just made things worse. Sharon felt bad for him when she saw how devastated he was. "Mr. Miller, you've been here for days. You should go home and rest. Stop causing trouble for Mrs. Miller." Ethan didn't want to add fuel to the flame, so he took Sharon's advice and gave Olivia some space. Sharon went back into the room. Olivia was lying in bed, deep in thought. "Mr. Miller has gone home, Mrs. Miller. He will be giving you some space for now." Olivia didn't respond. She just looked into the distance. Sharon felt bad for her when she looked at her frail silhouette. "Sharon, I want to get discharged." Sharon quickly explained, "Even if the chemotherapy is done, your condition is still unstable. You need to be kept under observation at the hospital. If you're missing home, we can go back after you've recovered a little more." "Home?" Olivia smiled bitterly. "The Miller residence isn't my home." She stared blankly at the ceiling. She said with a hollow voice, "Nowhere is my home. I lost my home long ago." Chapter 734. Sharon wanted to try to talk Olivia out of it. Olivia waved her hand and said, "I want to rest. Don't let him come in. I don't want to see him." "All right." Sharon tucked Olivia in and left the room. Ethan was carrying Connor in his arms outside. Connor was still crying and looked very pitiful. "Dad, I want to see Mom," Connor said as he tugged on Ethan's collar. Connor was almost 3 years old. He was able to express himself clearly. He hadn't seen his mother in a long time. He couldn't understand why his mother, who used to hug him all the time, suddenly became so aggressive. He just wanted to be hugged. Ethan was carrying him with one hand. He felt bad for Connor, too. "Your mother is sick, so she can't hug you yet." Connor rolled his eyes around and asked, "She's sick? Like this?" He imitated the way he coughed when he had a cold. Ethan tapped him on the nose lightly and said, "Mom is very ill. Take meds, get injection." "Okay, we'll get Mom some meds. She'll get better." Ethan sighed quietly. "I'll take you home." When they walked past the garden, Connor thought about something. He pointed at the flowers in the garden and pointed at his head. "Wreath, Dad. Make Mom a wreath." Ethan felt another pang in his heart. He didn't expect Connor to remember something that happened over a year ago. Back then, they went for a picnic as a family. They collected a lot of flowers and made a wreath for Olivia. Even though he was still very young, he remembered how happy Olivia was when she put on the wreath. Every time Ethan thought about the past, he would feel as if he had been stabbed in the chest. Pick flowers. Connor didn't think too hard about it. He ran into the garden to pick out pretty flowers and handed them to Ethan. "You want to make a wreath for Mom?" "Yes, let's do it." As they were picking flowers in the garden, a loud, feminine voice exclaimed, "Flower thieves. Are you really that broke? Why would you need to steal flowers to visit a patient?" Connor didn't know what was going on. It was the first time Ethan was accused of being a thief. He immediately carried Connor in his arms and ran without looking back. The head nurse yelled from behind, "You can't judge a book by its cover, indeed. Such a tall and well-dressed man is actually a thief." Olivia was lying in bed. The image of Ethan patting Marina's head kept appearing in her head. Whenever even though Ethan might be telling the truth, the image would pop up and steal her resolve. Did Ethan think she was a fool? He told her so many lies. Did he think she was an idiot? The head nurse came into the room to take some blood samples from Olivia for testing. "How are you feeling today, Miss Fordham?" "I'm feeling better but still weak." Don't worry about that. You're recovering faster compared to other patients. The first 2 weeks will be hard, but it will get better. Then, the next round of chemotherapy begins. Next round. Olivia frowned. The head nurse noticed her distress and changed the subject. Anyway, just let things run their course. Miss Fordham, don't worry too much. Funny story. I saw a father and his son stealing flowers from the hospital's garden. That's absurd. Who? There truly are all sorts of people in this world. That father is also setting a bad example for his son. The kid's future is bleak. Chapter 735. Olivia responded mildly, they must have been desperate. Why else would anyone steal flowers from the hospital? There are just too many weirdos in the world. They don't even have basic morals. Rest well, Miss Fordham. The head nurse closed the door and left. Olivia became drowsy after a while. She felt like she heard the door open but was too tired. So, she ignored it. She didn't notice the sound of footsteps. There were also some rustling sounds beside her, like someone was creeping around. Suddenly, she felt something being placed on her head. It wasn't a doctor. Olivia opened her eyes abruptly. She met the gaze of a set of bright, round eyes. The adorable little face was very close to her. Connor became embarrassed when he saw that Olivia had woken up. Mom, wreath. Connor was trying to set the wreath straight, so his arms were still hanging midair. It's you, Olivia murmured. Her gaze fell on the wreath he was holding. She was taken aback. She wondered if Connor and Ethan were the father-son duo the head nurse talked about who stole flowers from the garden. She was at a loss for words. What were they trying to pull? Connor noticed that Olivia didn't have a solemn expression anymore. So, he slowly climbed up the bed and leapt into Olivia's arms. Mom, I missed you. His words struck a chord for Olivia. But after the moment of tenderness, she felt a stab of pain in her heart. She didn't know why Connor would call her mom, but she knew he wasn't her child. But he was so cute and adorable that Olivia just couldn't resist. He knelt on the bed and put the wreath on her head with a serious expression. Then, he broke into a bright smile. The dimples on his cheeks caught Olivia's gaze. Mom, get well soon. Olivia just couldn't get angry at him. That innocent smile was too precious. So, she nodded her head absent-mindedly. Connor was overjoyed. He kissed her on the cheek and ran away. Ethan told him that he should let Olivia rest. He kept that in mind. Olivia touched the wreath and felt a surge of familiarity within. In the end, she didn't throw it away. Instead, she placed it next to her pillow. She could see it as soon as she opened her eyes. Connor was sent back home. He got to see his mother, so he was pleased. Irina was playing with dolls in the room. She saw him come home and greeted him. Connor, come play with me. Dolls are for girls. I want to learn to shoot guns so I can protect Mom when I grow up, Connor said with a smug expression. Mina cleared her throat. Master Connor, you must be hungry. Come eat. Marina suddenly appeared at the door quietly. She looked at Connor and said, Connor, come here. I have something to tell you. Mina followed him into the room. Marina said to her, go prepare dinner for Connor. Yes, Miss Carlton. The door was closed. Then, Marina beckoned Connor. Come over here. Connor was instinctively wary of Marina. She looked at this young face that was almost identical to Ethan's. She felt it was weird. Although Kurt looked like Ethan, it was still weird that his son looked so much like Ethan, too. If she hadn't witnessed her own child being born on the day of delivery, she would have thought that this was Olivia's child. After all, Connor wasn't close with her at all. She smiled gently at Connor and said, good boy, call me, Mom. Connor had never called her, Mom, before. Initially, she thought he had some sort of speech impediment. But she clearly heard him call Olivia that at the hospital. She tried to guide him patiently repeatedly, but Connor didn't comply. She finally lost her temper and slapped him. You little bastard, I'm your real mother. You called that bitch your mom but not me. I'm going to smack you. Chapter 736. Connor was already grown up. His first reaction after getting slapped wasn't to cry. Instead, he felt lost. He didn't know what he did wrong. Why did Marina beat him? A handprint appeared on his face, and his right cheek became swollen. Marina's rage quickly dissipated, and she started to feel guilty. She drew him into her embrace and said, "Baby, did it hurt? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." She hated Olivia with every fiber of her being, but her mood quickly improved when she thought about Olivia's dwindling lifespan. A hint of joy flashed on her face. "That bitch is going to die soon. That's great. Baby, we'll have your father with us again. You look so much like him, so you have to cozy up to him so he will treat us better." After everything she has been through, she became mentally unstable. She would change her mood abruptly. Her expressions were crazed. Connor feared her more and more. The fear was apparent in his eyes, and he was too scared to speak. Mina knocked on the door. She saw Connor's swollen cheek. In the past, Marina had spanked Connor when she had emotionally unstable moments, but she had never slapped his face before. The sight of his swollen cheek pained Mina, who had practically raised him. "You saw everything, didn't you? I was just disciplining my son. Why are you looking at me like that?" Marina asked nonchalantly. Mina suppressed her anger and said, "I want to know what terrible thing Master Connor did that would warrant such harsh treatment. How could you be so heavy-handed with discipline on a child who is barely 3 years old? He is so well behaved that I can hardly bear to see him hurt. How did you find it in yourself to do such a thing? How dare you talk to me like that? Who do you think you are?" Marina tried to stand up and hit Mina. She forgot that her legs were completely crippled, and she could not stand. She fell as soon as she tried to stand. Mina hugged the child with a tender expression. She said, "In the past, I endured your treatment of Master Connor. But you've only gotten worse. Do you know that slapping can potentially cause him to go deaf?" Mina thought Marina would learn her lesson after she had been through so many hardships. The sad truth was that some people were born evil, and they could never change their ways. Marina had only gotten worse. She was even venting her frustration on Connor. Marina's expression quickly changed when Mina picked Connor up and began to walk away. Her cocky demeanor quickly faded. "Where are you going?" Master Connor had become strong and confident after almost a year of solitary training. "You were the one who cried and begged to see him. That was why Mr. Miller gave you a chance to meet. But he has only been here for such a short time, and he's become so sensitive. This is proof that you're not suited to be a mother. You're also not worthy of raising Master Connor." Marina immediately cried and started to beg, "I'm sorry, Mina. Please don't take him away. I'll never do that again. I was just angry because he called Olivia his mom but not me. I swear I will treat him better. Please don't tell Ethan about this." Marina knew that she had almost exhausted the gratitude Ethan had for Kurt. If she angered Ethan again, the cancellation of the engagement would be the least of her worries. The entire Carlton family would be at stake. She wiggled on the ground and, with tears streaming down her cheeks, she said, "I beg of you, Mina. Please give me another chance." Chapter 737. Mina had been with Marina for a few years, but she had never seen Marina in such a pitiful state. Marina kept sobbing, "I've already lost my parents and my home. I won't ever be able to stand again, either. I only have these 2 children. If you tell Ethan about this, he won't let me see the children ever again." Marina tugged at Mina's pants with great difficulty, pleading with all her might. Mina had no choice but to say, "I don't want to see this happening again." With that, she left with Connor in her arms. While she treated his swelling, she felt disbelief as well. How could a mother treat her son like that? "Does it hurt?" Connor simply shook his head without saying anything. Mina's heart broke when she saw how desolate he looked. Mina sighed. What a mess. When Olivia fell ill, the whole Miller family was thrown into chaos as well. Ethan returned to the small building while Harold sat under a cherry tree. Harold seemed to be mumbling something. Is Grandpa's illness acting up again? Yes. Ever since Madame Eugenia passed away, Mr. Harold's illness would come and go. He was quite well these days, but then Mrs. Miller's incident happened. Oh, well, it wasn't the season for the cherries on the tree to ripen yet. But Harold kept staring at its branches. What are you looking at, Grandpa? I'm waiting for the cherries to turn ripe. Ethan was puzzled. Mr. Thorne, Does my grandpa like cherries? I've never seen him being particularly fond while he was sober. But when his illness acts up, he would often sit under the cherry trees. Now that I think about it, he had someone plant these trees 2 years ago. He loved to sit under the. Ethan asked, does my grandma like cherries? She would eat some cherry jam from time to time. She doesn't seem to have a particular preference for it. Ethan slowly walked toward Harold. He heard Harold saying to himself, oh tall cherry tree with leaves so green, bear some cherries for Miss Nat to see. Miss Nat. Ethan's expression shifted. He felt that something was off about Harold. Who is Miss Nat? He asked in a whisper. Miss Nat is Miss Nat, of course. She's the prettiest woman in the world. When Harold spoke those words, he looked like a youngster who had just fallen in love. His rough cheeks were even tinted pink. Do you like Miss Nat? Miss Nat is so pretty. Everyone likes her. Sadly, she doesn't like me. A sorrowful look flashed across Harold's eyes. Ethan took out Olivia's photo. Is this Miss Nat? Miss Nat. Harold looked shy, but he quickly denied it. This isn't Miss Nat. Olivia looked a lot like Miss Nat, especially from certain angles. But Harold could tell the difference right away. It was clear that he truly cared about this woman. If Ethan's guess was correct, Miss Nat must be the woman Harold loved before he met Eugenia. Men would never forget the women of their dreams. Take Ethan, for example. After a glance at Olivia back then, he decided that his whole life would be dedicated to her. When Harold wasn't completely aware, he had forgotten about the present. Instead, his memories lingered on his first love in the past. If Harold met Eugenia after death, Eugenia might beat him up until he died a second time. It was no wonder that Harold would deny ever knowing Miss Nat. After all, who would tell their descendants about their first love? To get more information from Harold, Ethan asked, what is Miss Nat's full name? Which family did she come from? Harold looked at him warily. Why, do you like Miss Nat as well? I'm not telling you. Ethan was exasperated. Softening his tone, he said, Grandpa, if you know anything about Miss Nat, please tell me. If I can find Liv's family for her, she will have the motivation to keep living. Chapter 738. Even after a long while of questioning, Ethan couldn't get any information from Harold. Based on the information he had gathered, Miss Nat must have been a fugitive who had escaped to Arlandia. She had also used a fake identity and name. Then, she disappeared during the chaos later on. Ethan was exasperated. There was still no news of Colin. If this went on, only death awaited Olivia. The only difference was whether she would die sooner rather than later. Still, the past few days weren't completely fruitless. When he went back to the shed, Daryl was barely hanging on. His whole body was drenched in blood. By the looks of it, Kelvin didn't hold back so that he could get even the tiniest bit of information from Daryl. Mr. Miller, Daryl said that he had known Rubus for 2 to 3 years by now. They had never met in person, but Rubus helped him out a few times before. Those few times are related to the purchase of the Miller Group's shares. Ethan said, no wonder Daryl has so many shares. He had help from a powerful figure. That person could fork out up to $100 million to kill Liv. I can see that they're very wealthy. Kelvin nodded as well. That's right. Mr. Miller Sr.'s properties alone aren't enough to support Daryl's actions. Still, there's something I don't understand. If Miss Miller is Rubus, I can understand her enmity toward Mrs. Miller. But why would she spend money to help Daryl? She must hate Daryl even more, right? Leia is not Rubus. Ethan rejected the possibility right away. She has disguised herself as a janitor by my side for years, but she never had the intention to hurt me. If she wanted to harm me, she could have drugged me or sent the Miller Group's data to its rivals. She was so close to me that she had 100 ways to destroy the Miller Group. Why would she take the longer route and spend so much money to help a weak man? Kevin replied, that's true. Then there's only one thing we can be sure of. The person wanted Mrs. Miller dead as a woman. From the back, she resembled Mrs. Miller a lot in terms of height and figure. She must not be more than 30 years old. She's a young woman. Kelvin rubbed his chin. Why would a young lady want to kill Mrs. Miller and even spend money in astronomical numbers to get her killed? What other clues did you get from Daryl? Oh, right. After Daryl failed in Arlandia, Rubus once took the initiative to contact him. She told him to make use of the opportunity to kill Mrs. Miller. Daryl wasn't a fool, either. Realizing that he was exposed, he quickly left. Ethan said, so this woman willingly spent 2 to 3 years and even a large sum of money so that she could get Daryl on her side. Defeating me wasn't her main purpose. Most importantly, Daryl's identity gave him chances to get close to Liv. Then, she could attack Liv without anyone noticing. Kelvin felt a chill running down his spine. This woman is so terrifying. She had already begun to set up a trap 2 to 3 years ago. It's a good thing that this guy prioritizes sex over everything else. His mind was filled with plans to conquer Mrs. Miller, so he didn't get to kill her in time. Ethan glared at Kelvin, who hastily slapped himself. Sorry, that was the wrong thing to say. This guy's thieving heart is still beating, and he still wants Mrs. Miller. Mr. Miller, how are you going to deal with him? Rubus must be wary now, and she won't contact him anymore. Investigate their interactions in the past. No matter how well guarded it is, we can still find something. Understood, Mr. Miller. Kelvin noticed Ethan's bloodshot eyes. He gave a few words of advice. You've worked hard looking after Mrs. Miller for the past few days. You should rest. It's after you've rested that you can have the energy to protect Mrs. Miller. I'm worried that Mrs. Miller's condition will be like Mrs. Carlton's before she dies. If someone uses this incident to provoke her, Ethan said. True, it's easy to run into trouble with so many people at the hospital. Go and get the discharge procedures done. Take Liv home. Understood, Mr. Miller. Chapter 739. After staying in the hospital for a week, Olivia was discharged. She had been recovering for a week. So now, she could get out of bed and walk around on her own. Still, her red blood cells and white blood cells had very low counts. She would feel dizzy every day, and she was still extremely weak. But it was already great news to her that she could leave the hospital. When Olivia returned to the Miller residence, Sharon spoke as she moved Olivia's wheelchair. Mrs. Miller, Mr. Miller has prepared a room for you on the first floor. You can go out into the yard from there. Just concentrate on recuperating. I'm sure you'll get better in the future. All right. Ethan was probably worried that he might stimulate her, so he never appeared in front of her in recent days. But Olivia knew that most of the time, he waited until she was asleep to sneak in and watch over her. When she woke up, he would leave quietly. Olivia didn't understand why he would do that. He had his wife and children, so why was he investing so much effort in her? Still, Olivia was in a better mood now that he wasn't around. After returning to her room, the first thing she wanted to do was to take a shower. During the week she was hospitalized, Sharon took great care of her. Picking up a brush, Olivia got ready to brush her messy hair. As she moved the brush down, her hair fell in dense heaps. Lots of her hair was caught on the brush as well. Olivia was startled as she looked at the hair on the basin and the brush. She had been suffering for the past few days, and she almost forgot about the numerous side effects of chemotherapy. One of the most prominent side effects was hair fall. Within 2 sessions, her hair would be completely gone. Soon, even if she didn't die, she would become completely bald. Grabbing a tissue, she picked up the hair that had fallen onto the floor. She wanted to pretend as if nothing had happened. As the water from the shower rained down, her hair kept falling. She felt her head getting heavy, so she could only sit down slowly as she leaned against the wall. Scenes flashed across her mind, and she saw herself in the past. Ethan had tied her up in the bathroom. Holding the shower head in his hand, he poured water on her over and over again. It was in the cold winter. The chilly water drenched her from head to toe. The coldness ate into her body, causing her immense suffering. She heard herself begging Ethan to let her off. But the only response she received was the man's even colder attitude. It had happened so long ago, but Olivia could still feel the coldness. It was so cold that it seemed to penetrate her bones. Tears slowly rolled down her cheeks. She couldn't understand why Ethan would be so cruel that he would hurt her like that. Knocks sounded on the door. Sharon asked worriedly, "Are you okay, Mrs. Miller? Should I come in to help?" Olivia suppressed the sobs in her voice. "It's okay. I'll be done soon." After putting on her clothes, she walked out. Her hair was still wet, and she looked terrible. Sharon hastily came over with a hair dryer. "How can you not dry your hair? What if you catch a cold? Mrs. Miller, your immune system is very weak. Right now, you absolutely mustn't catch a cold. It will be very dangerous if you have a fever." With that, she started the hair dryer. Hair began to scatter and fall, and the scene was quite alarming. It was only then that Sharon realized why Olivia didn't dry her hair. As soon as she did, her hair would get all over the place. "This is a normal occurrence, don't worry, Mrs. Miller. After you stop chemo, your hair will grow back again." Olivia smiled faintly. "Keep drying, they'll fall sooner or later, anyway." "Understood." After washing her hair, Olivia felt as if a third of her hair was gone. When she touched it with her fingers, she could feel that her hair had decreased a lot. She couldn't even save her own life. A few strands of hair wouldn't matter. Chapter 740. Seeing that Olivia was in low spirits, Sharon comforted her. "You haven't been eating well these days. Now that you finally have an appetite, Mrs. Miller Sr. is making some food for you." Olivia nodded. Instead of getting in the wheelchair, she slowly moved to the living room. Janice was wearing an apron. "Hurry and have a seat. The food will be ready soon." There were freshly picked flowers in the exquisite white vase on the dining table. Every leaf was fresh and green. Once again, Olivia recalled the snowy weather. She was arranging flowers in the warm indoors. Her belly was bulging, and her lips were slightly curved. The door opened, and Ethan walked in. He angrily questioned her why she would cause trouble for Marina, especially when Marina was pregnant. But he seemed to have forgotten that Olivia was also pregnant at that moment. When the coldness reached its peak, he smashed her vase. Fresh flowers scattered onto the floor. Olivia held her head, hissing. For some reason, she would recall the memories from the past from time to time. "What's the matter, Olivia? Does your head hurt?" Janice hastily comforted her. Olivia was about to say something when a series of images appeared in her mind. She was almost always alone, keeping watch over an empty house. The flowers in the vase were changed out time and again, but that man never returned. "Olivia, don't scare me like this. What is happening to you? Should I call a doctor over to have a look at you?" Olivia shook her head. With a trembling finger, she pointed at the vase. "Take it away." "All right, sure. I'll take it away right now. I learned to cook for the sake of that jerk. It's so pathetic when I think about it. I've never even made a meal for my parents." Olivia realized that her memories from the past kept entering her mind. For example, her hands were meant for working in medicine. But for Ethan's sake, she took up the knife and shovel. Every time those memories surfaced, Olivia felt extreme pain. She had to experience the suffering all over again. Janice noticed Olivia's changes. "This doesn't look good. I have a bad feeling about this." Sharon spoke up. "Mrs. Miller used to have a cat, and it should have arrived by now. They say that animals can heal people's hearts, so why don't we try with the cat?" "Sure, but I have a feeling that Olivia's illness lies in her heart." Olivia forced herself to eat some of the food. Then, she sat in the yard, basking in the warm sun. Suddenly, a white cat darted over to her. "Meow. This cat is Janice introduced them. This is the pet cat you used to own. Her name is Snowball." "Snowball. Yes." An image appeared in Olivia's mind. A little girl had a backpack on her shoulders as a small white cat followed her and meowed. Every time she came home from school, the little cat would be waiting for her at the junction. She would run toward the white cat right away and then raise it into the air. The scene was mirrored in the present. Olivia was sitting in the wheelchair as she lifted Snowball. "Long time no see, Snowball." Meow. All the memories of her time with Snowball since she was young began to surface in her mind. She felt that she should be glad that she had a happy childhood. She had her father's love. Fearing that she would feel lonely, he even adopted Snowball for her. Snowball wasn't a purebred cat, but it was quite understanding toward humans. When Snowball was young, It helped her get through the loss of her mother. Now that Snowball was old, it would heal the pains caused by her illness. Olivia held Snowball in her arms. She and her cat looked very peaceful together. Janice was even more convinced now that they had made the right decision. Sharon suddenly remembered something. By the way, when Snowball was sent here, it came with this bottle along with some of its toys. I heard that when it came back from the island, it was already holding this bottle in its mouth. I looked inside, but I'm not sure if the contents were medicine or candy. It doesn't look like cat food, either. I'm also worried that it might harm Mrs. Miller. Janice glanced at the unlabeled bottle. The things inside looked a little like small pills. Snowball is an old cat now, and old cats usually understand humans. This means that the things inside the bottle are very important to Snowball. Tell Ethan to test the contents to see what they are. Understood, Mrs. Miller Sr.